Welcome to AI Role Models, a podcast from One Strategy Studio that goes beyond the hype to explore how real leaders are transforming their businesses with artificial intelligence. In each episode, I'll sit down with pioneers from the world's leading brands who are reimagining marketing, insights, and innovation with AI. But we're not here to talk about theoretical possibilities. These are candid conversations about the real challenges, unexpected victories, and practical lessons learned from implementing AI in organizations. Here's today's episode. Good morning, everybody. It is another episode of AI Heroes. I'm delighted to be here. Kyle Papanikolas from McDonald's. Kyle, so good to have you on the show. Maybe just spend a few minutes introducing yourself and telling the audience a little bit more about your role at McDonald's, heading up kind of US strategic insights and what that's focused on.
Yeah. So firstly, happy St. Patrick's Day.
Indeed.
I noticed I'm gonna have to call you out here. I've got my St. Patrick's Day green on. I see that you don't. So I'm gonna give you a little pinch through this screen. No, thank you for having me. So yes, Kyle Papanikolas, very good job at getting my last name. I head up consumer insights at McDonald's. I've been within the insights field for about 20 years now. So started out for supplier side, worked my way over to the client side. Was at Anheuser-Busch for a while, and then I've been at McDonald's for about 11 years. And so I head up our consumer insights team.
So thinking about kind of that, you've been there 11 years, 20 years in insights. I guess when you... Yeah, a long time, right? You've seen a few things. Obviously, the transition we've seen, particularly over the last couple of years, has been nothing short of remarkable. But you started at a time where a lot of the work that we did in this industry was incredibly manual. So I guess kind of what's your current relationship with AI? Are you skeptic, evangelist, somewhere in between? What's your perspective?
Yeah, so like if I think back to when I started in the industry, I think it was right around when they created the wheel. But no. I remember like when I started supplier side, a lot of the work that we did was very, very manual. And I remember like part of my job was to check code and check the survey and like create tables and PowerPoints. And honestly, like for years and years and years, that's how the industry was. And I've noticed that a lot has changed within the past few years, and there's been a lot of advancements like you talked about with AI. I think where I sit now is I call myself a healthy skeptic, meaning like I totally believe in the vision of AI. I believe in the potential of AI. I think within our field, it's really, really important that we have a certain degree of skepticism. Yep. And so for me, the way that I've been thinking about it is there's some things that are very, very low risk, which, hey, we can move forward, test that, see the benefits, the efficiencies that come out of it. There is some stuff, though, that is higher risk. And in those, you have to be really, really skeptical and actually test and learn. And I think we're going to probably talk about this a little bit later on. But we have found some of those higher risk things. AI actually doesn't give you the answers that you need to advance the organization and could potentially lead you in the wrong direction, which not only hurts the business, but I think hurts your credibility as an insights professional.
Yeah, no, that's something that we've heard a lot, and I know we're going to hit on a couple of kind of core examples of that. When we chatted before the show, you talked a little bit about this idea of this kind of two camp theory, this idea that AI is creating two camps in the insights professional. Can you walk us through kind of what your thinking is here?
Yeah, I kind of alluded to it earlier, and I'm oversimplifying things, but I think there's kind of two different types of insights professionals that I've seen throughout my career. There's the more technical ones who are really, really good at survey writing. They understand the technical approach. They're very good at making PowerPoint presentations and providing, I would say, simple recommendations. I'm being a bit provocative, but I do think over time that role is going to be less and less valuable, both on the supplier side and especially within organizations. And I think they'll be in favor of the other profile, which is more of a strategic thought partner. So it's less about the technical aspects of how work is done and much more of how do you actually apply that back to the business? How do you drive strategic thought? And also, how do you come up with like the right prompts and questions to get the answers that you need? And I think it's going to have a lot more emphasis on soft skills, for example, higher level thinking. I think that's going to be what advances and thrives within insights. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see a merging happening within the world where strategy and insights start to come together.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do think that insights is going to go more into the strategic angle in terms of the profile and less of the technical aspects of doing surveys.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously with One Strategy Studio, that's a lot of where we've been thinking about kind of that mix of human capital and expertise to provide strategic insights backed ideas and innovation. So where do you see this heading and playing out over the next few years? I mean, obviously, there's impacts on the client side, there's impact on the agency, but if you were coaching maybe someone in their career that's working on the client side, where should they be focusing?
Yeah, I think it's just going to continue to advance because if you think about how much it's advanced over the last 2 to 3 years, and I kind of think back to, I don't know if you've seen the Will Smith spaghetti video where it was like created by AI 3 years ago versus, and it's just a hot mess versus like today, what it looks like, which is a perfect image of Will Smith eating spaghetti. Like that's kind of what I think about the insights field too. And so I think, like I said, those technical roles will start to go away over time. But I think also for the people who sit more on the strategic angle, they're going to have to get on the AI train. And like I said earlier, you have to be very, very careful. Don't use AI everywhere, but you need to start experimenting with it now. You need to start bringing it part of your everyday work and seeing where it adds benefit, because that's going to be where the industry goes overall. And what I would say is for people who are in the field and in the industry, I would think about how you can build your expertise within AI, which I'm getting the training wheels on right now personally. But B, also think about how you can take more of that strategic path, which could be getting a mentor, for example, somebody who has more of a strategic angle within insights, getting such opportunities where you actually have the role and opportunity to move into something that is more about driving influence, networking, working on soft skills. I think it's going to be really, really important within this field if you want to advance and be really successful.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is, as you say, things are moving fast. A lot of the people that I'm talking to, there's a sense of both excitement and an overwhelm of how quickly things are moving, and actually kind of just keeping up alongside back-to-back meetings all day. The day job and everything is always extremely difficult. I know Claude just released a really good foundational training through SkillJar, which I definitely recommend to anyone listening to this. As there's a lot now happening with co-work and Claude Code, and Claude Code was always seen as this engineering tool, but you're seeing more and more tools in go-to-market, in insights and marketing, leveraging Claude Code as well. So I think it's a really exciting time, but also the challenge is the playbooks are still being kind of written at this time. So the only way to really kind of move forward with this is to kind of get your hands dirty, roll up your sleeves, try things out. Not everything's going to work. When we were chatting before, you talked a little bit about kind of how with the rise of AI and things like synthetic sample and other data sources and other ways to get to answers, you think we have to be really, really careful about using AI to replace hearing directly from the customers. So talk to us a little bit about kind of how you feel about that and why where AI should and shouldn't be used in the customer voice.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it goes back to what I started talking about earlier, which is we need to be very, very careful on things that are higher risk in terms of how we use AI. And so I'll give you a basic example of At McDonald's, obviously, we do a lot of product tests, which
Yep.
that hasn't changed in ages and ages. Of you bring a bunch of customers into a facility, you give them food, they try the food, they fill out a survey, you get results. And typically you're talking to 150, 200 customers. It can be slow, it can be expensive. To experiment, we actually did a test where we said, okay, what if we do 50 customers instead? And then we use AI to extrapolate out the results and fill in gaps. What we actually found is when we did that, we came up with a different conclusion compared to just using 200 respondents. And so that's where you need to be really, really careful is, that using AI could actually send you in the wrong direction as a business overall. But I think, again, it goes back to your reputation and credibility of we are consumer insights professionals. It is our job to bring the voice of the customer into the forefront. And when you're using AI, you're kind of using personas or archetypes of customers, but they aren't really customers. And I think there is a high risk of breaking credibility there. So I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying you need to validate and make sure that it's actually driving the right business decisions and be very, very careful of how you use it so you don't break credibility with your team and with the organization.
And I know you're a big believer in that, the kind of human story and that deeper connection.
Yeah.
We connected last year at Quirk Chicago. I think you presented with Alan Moskovitz from C-Space. Incredible presentation about a really deep investment into human story. Maybe just share a little bit about that, because that's that couldn't be more further from the kind of AI future in terms of what you invested in there and how you brought it to the team.
Yeah, it was funny when we were planning. So yeah, Alan and C-Space, they're great partners for us overall. And so when we were planning for this, we said the whole frigging conference is going to be about AI. We are going to go in the complete opposite direction. And it worked. It was really impactful, which just speaks to like where the field and the industry is right now. And the study that we did, and I think it's no secret that we, in a lot of industries, have had challenges with lower income consumers. And what we actually said when we did the study is we're like, we got tons and tons of data that says, they can't pay their bills, they're price sensitive, like all the obvious stuff. We want to move beyond that and actually understand who they are as people. And so we went out and did deep, rich, story-led ethnographies on, I think it was like 4 or 5 different low-income consumers. And we brought that to our executive team and we made them sit down and watch a 15-minute video in complete silence. And literally, like the stories that were told, like you could see people starting to tear up and get emotional. Like it was really, really powerful stuff. But like what it did is it just moved beyond that, all that obvious data, and really brought the power of empathy, which then allowed us to unlock what it's truly like to be like them and create more urgency within the business, and also reframe how we think about things like value to move beyond the transactional to be more emotional. So I think what's going to happen within the category is there is a role for AI, like I've talked about, especially on things that are more repeatable, like copy testing and stuff like that. But I do think you will see a complete opposite move towards deep, rich insights that come from Paul and come from ethnographies that are about developing empathy and helping dimensionalize data and information as a way to create differentiation within the marketplace.
Yeah. So when you think about kind of when you're talking to kind of vendors and partners you work with that are maybe kind of going quite far down the AI track and trying to pitch you on concepts like synthetic data, and you've mentioned this study where the results that came out were pretty different in terms of the conclusions. How are you seeing kind of pushback? How are you guys collaborating with vendors about the right mix of kind of what you want, and are you having to kind of split work between vendors, or are you being able to find partners that can give you that kind of hybrid approach, I guess?
Yeah, we no, I think it's a good question of like, so every vendor and partner is coming with some sort of angle on AI. whether
Hmm.
that's about interpreting results or about replacing respondents with synthetic data. So like it's out there and it's everywhere. I haven't seen pushback necessarily of like, oh, you need to go into AI. That's the future. I think the conversations that we have is we are open minded and curious, and we come to the table like understanding, okay, what is it that you're offering? What's the benefit of this first and foremost?
Yep.
And then if we think there's a there, then we can talk about how do we actually test it out, both
Hmm.
from like, does it actually truly add value? But then does it actually drive business decisions, especially if you're talking about, replacing respondents or doing something that is about extrapolating data? That becomes the next step. So, the vast majority of our work right now is, I guess you could say, the old school way of doing research, which is more traditional formats. What we are doing, though, is leveraging AI both with our partners and internally as how do we speed up the process on interpreting those results, putting them into PowerPoint, pressure testing some of the answers that we come up with on the back end. So we're a bit, I would say, not behind, but still in the experimental phase of when it comes to design
Yep.
using AI, but we are leaning more and more to how can you use AI to speed up the more manual process that comes on the back end so you can focus more on thought leadership.
Makes a lot of sense. One of the examples you gave of a kind of strategic partnership where you've leveraged AI was with some macro trend forecasting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and you talked about it was important that AI actually delivered that strategic value. Maybe walk us a little bit through that project, the challenge. I believe it was actually like a few years ago as well, right? So this
It was
was
a
like
while. Yeah.
definitely an early AI project.
Yeah. And it was probably 4 or 5 years ago, I want to say. Very early on, it was a startup company. And they sold us on the idea of using AI as a way to dimensionalize and identify macro trends. And we had tried trends like a billion different ways. And
Hmm.
I think what really stood out to us when we decided to partner with them is they had the ability to use AI, which allows you to not only identify trends, but actually size trends from different angles. So you can start to understand the push and pull that happens within society. And also, with a big company like us, we get hit from a lot of different angles. It's not just our customers. We have to think about the government, we have to think about the industry overall. And so
Hmm.
they actually had a really, really nice framing where they would use Google search, for example, to say, okay, what's the consumer pull of a trend? Then they would use industry publications to say, okay, how much is that trend actually advancing within the industry? And then use legislative lobbying and papers and sizing that to understand the external societal pressures. And so you actually have these strategic conversations about the push and pull of like something doesn't have consumer pull, but there's a ton of industry push and a ton of
Yep.
legislative push. We know that's going to be really, really big in the future, because that's going to influence consumers over the long term. So that's just an example of it, of where AI didn't give us the answer. What it did was there's a great way of collecting data and providing multiple different views and integrating those, which then allowed us to have really strategic conversations that we would not have had before.
Is that obviously that was some time ago? Is there anything? So as really at the start of this, I guess. Is there anything that you think, looking now, would be possible now that wasn't possible back then, or kind of was there anything that kind of surprised you at the time as to AI's ability? I mean, fantastic to be able to kind of, as you say, rather than having to look at things in isolation, be able
Yeah.
to pull those three lenses together and kind of get alignment across there.
Yeah. I think it's back then, it was really, really impressive that we could combine all these different views together because they always sat in silos. We'd have like a government relations team that would focus on the legislative piece of it. We would think about consumer demand. So like that was most impressive, is like how it brought all those views together. As I think
Hmm.
about where we are now, I think if you were to do the same type of study, it'd be way faster because it
Yep.
actually took a ton of time to get like everything set up back then. And there was a lot
Yeah.
of manual work that came into play. But
Hmm.
I think also it would be so much more powerful in terms of driving to specific decision making and potentially even getting more micro. Because
Yep.
what happened back then is there's still a lot of manual work, which meant it took a ton of time, but then you still kind of end up with like macro, like the obvious types of trends. But now I think you could take that down to, 2, 3, 4 clicks down to get down to the specifics and leverage AI to do it, and maybe even come up with recommendations of what you do with it, or spot signals of things that are arriving in real time. So, back then it was like, the training wheels version of it. Now I can't imagine where a study like that would take an organization and what the potential is there.
Yeah, I mean, I think perfect example of AI handling that data collection and synthesis, and
Yep.
the human team providing that
Yep.
strategic lens. So thinking a little bit about McDonald's AI journey is, everybody knows McDonald's, huge company, global, complex business model focused on operational efficiency, probably more data than I remember going to the your conference, the
Worldwide.
convention,
Yeah.
worldwide convention, and just seeing, just how much thought goes into dwell time and drive through and distance for, just the incredible amount of data science that's going into, making sure, people are in and out and get great food. When you think about how the company is approaching AI adoption kind of more broadly than insights, what are some of the things that are happening at a company wide initiative level, and then how does that then translate into kind of how you're getting your team kind of to be embracing this stuff?
Yeah, I think it's what I have seen across the company is within the last 6 months or so, it has become a huge priority for the business across everything that we do.
Hmm.
Uh, I think where the business is starting right now in terms of the biggest focus is around ways of working. It's a very simple thing, but they gave everyone Copilot licenses this year.
Yep.
And now they're doing intense training around it and offering support for the teams and reinforcing it within the culture. And you're seeing organically, like people are starting to use it in real time and experiment and like share best practices. And like that is really starting to take off as like the quick wins, obvious things that you could do that allow you just to free up time, regardless of whatever, if you're in operations or marketing
Hmm.
or legal or whatever it is. So that's like step one of what they're doing. I do get the sense beyond that that they are thinking more about how we can use AI in a way that's customer facing, for example, or a way to get much smarter of how we actually drive demand within the marketplace. We have done some experimental pilots of testing, for example, AI as a way to think about the drive-through. This is not to replace people, or it's not a labor initiative overall, but it frees up time for the people who work within our restaurant so they can add more value in the restaurant as well. So we're still early on in the experimental phase, but I do expect it's really going to take off in the next couple of years. Both within the everyday ways of working, which we're already seeing happen right now, but then also in terms of back end operations, other things that we do, and even potentially customer facing, which is a very careful line that we have to walk down. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see more of that over the next couple of years.
For sure. And with your team, I mean, you talking about previously how you're sharing a lot of your own AI
Yeah.
experiments and prompts with the team, and there's really this kind of sense of, well, if our leader's doing it, if etc., I should be looking into it, because I think that when it first came out, a lot of people were nervous. There was certainly within big corporations there were a lot of
Yeah.
guardrails around what can I do with certain pieces of data, what can I use. But I think kind of it's really good, I think, when leaders are seen to be embracing it, and kind of, is there anything you've seen within the team that has kind of, other than kind of leading by example, that's really kind of helped empower that usage?
Yeah, we're still early on. I think is what I'd say. So I want to be honest around that. But like setting the example is really important. That's something we both know. Michelle Gansley, she
Hmm.
taught me that as a leader of like the signals and behaviors that you send
Yep.
go a long way of influence your team. And so I am trying to send signals to my team of like how I'm using Copilot and integrating it part of my everyday life so that they'll follow suit. I think what's interesting is that organically people are starting to play around with it and they're starting to share with their peers of like, oh, it's really cool. I tried this out and I did this, this, and this. I think
Yeah.
the next step of what I want to do with that is actually be a bit more formal and organized of how we share some of those best practices.
Yeah.
I want to keep the organic conversations, but what I'm actually thinking is in some of my team meetings is start to force conversations of like what are things that we've actually learned through Copilot. Do more training with and upskilling with the team overall to formalize it. So I'm really excited that there's natural pull coming from the team. But I do think there's a way that we can be a bit more coordinated around it, just so we're reinforcing more and more of those behaviors and cross-pollinating great use cases across the team.
So it sounds like most of the team are fairly enthusiastic about this.
Yeah.
Have you had to deal with any kind of team members or colleagues that have had more resistance to it, and how do you think about that?
Not outright resistance. It is the resistance of inertia,
Mm,
meaning like you're so used to doing something one way, breaking that behavior is very, very hard.
yeah.
And so it's less of like a subconscious deep down type of influence or rejection that's happening. And I think that just comes with repetition and like really pushing the team on that. Or just a basic example is I had somebody on my team who sent me something. It was just like a one slide, and I said all the content is great. Usually, I would say, "Hey, can you simplify that?" Because it's going to go in a presentation that we want to keep it really simple. I actually thought about it. And I said, "Hey, why don't you put that in a Copilot
Yep.
and see how it can simplify it for you?" And I'm assuming she did that because she came up with a new recommendation that was much more simplified and presentation friendly. So it's those little nudges and prompts of she could have spent an hour, hour and a half trying to simplify and synthesize everything and laboring
Yep.
over every word, or she just put it into Copilot, maybe, I hope at least, and 30 seconds later got a simplified side. So it's those small reinforcement nudges are
Yep.
going to help shift the behaviors of the inertia that we have today of spending years and years doing something manual when you can have Copilot do it for you.
For sure. Those aha moments are still so great, and I think kind of showing as you show different people, friends, colleagues, kind of what's possible. It seems at the moment where there's such a different curve of like I was talking to a friend the other day and like, oh, I put in where I snowboarded and what I did, and it
Yep,
recommended me like what
yep,
snowboard I should buy, and I was like,
yep,
yeah, like it's kind of cool, and his mind was blown, and I was like, yeah, like wait till you see like this and this and stuff. So yeah, it's kind
yep.
of, yeah, I think kind of everybody's on a journey. Obviously for a big company, one of the challenges that you have is kind of so much data, but a lot of that kind of current architecture is in older systems, and kind of things take a lot more time to roll out. What's the kind of current reality of what you're seeing? You talked about a lot of experimentation, you're starting to see outputs, but yeah, what else are you kind of seeing in terms of implementation?
Yeah, the hard part with large organizations like ours that sit on older systems is, it's funny, like you mentioned earlier, like people say, wow, you must have so much data on your customers. And we've come a long way from where we were, but all that transactional data, we don't know who the customer is unless they're on the app.
Yeah.
And even then, we don't know who they are specifically,
Yeah.
but we don't know, most of the transactions we have, we don't know who the person is. We don't know who's in their party overall. We don't know what they were doing beforehand. So like there's a lot of gaps in
Mm,
information, and a lot of the data is siloed and sits in different places or is on archaic technology. And so part of the challenge that we've had is how do you get the foundation built to enable where AI and other tools can help? There are some areas like with our customer data where it's a lot easier because the infrastructure is newer and because we built it in a way that um, enables AI, but then you have a lot of our more archaic systems where it's very, very difficult, especially as you think across multiple countries, where like even small coding examples where things are different across the world makes it very complicated to bring everything together and drive impact. So I think that's the big part is fixing the foundation first, which then will allow us to enable and unlock the potential when you think about all that sales data.
Yeah, fantastic. I want to switch gears a little bit, and we touched on this a little bit earlier, but I want to kind of dive into a little bit of like that advice for, early careers professionals, people who are
Yeah,
navigating the insights industry, getting started. You've got a lot of what we've talked about around AI has been, a lot of the traditional entry level work and, product testing, survey operations, those types of things can be now automated. You talked about the importance of kind of mentorship on the strategic side of things, but yeah, I mean, kind of imagine I'm, early in my career. What's your recommendations to me to kind of to be successful over the next kind of 5 to 10 years with where everything's going?
yeah. I think it's in very simple terms, it's to find ways that you can sit more within that second camp that I talked about earlier, which is more of the partner and thought leader. And so part of that, a lot of insights people are more introverted. I am introverted, and like I really embrace that, and I like to support introverts. But you got to find ways to build some of your soft skills and find ways that you can still be true to who you
Yep.
are, to drive influence and drive impact. I think is one. So like getting out there and doing things like, for example, like this is a great way to start to build that muscle and build more confidence in yourself. Mentorships are a great idea overall. I think also talking about, are there opportunities to choose career paths that allow you to do more strategic thinking or think more about the application of the work will strengthen what you do. And then still, I think you need to get really, really smart with AI. And what I would push people also, especially more on the supplier side, is don't be afraid to break existing models, because I'd imagine you probably do have a lot of people within the company like, well, we've always done it this way, and like, why would we
Yep.
change? Or it's just like the inertia that I talked about. And actually, for people who are young and know how to use some of this technology, is don't be afraid to come in and say, hey, I found a way that can make this 5 times
Yep.
faster, and demonstrate it for the organization and push it forward. Because I think that's another way of just driving thought leadership, like in a very different way, from less about business impact with recommendations and all that, but more about driving efficiencies within the organization. So, like, again, try to move more into the path of thought partner, influencer, strategic thinker, and understand the technical aspects and how they work. It's still really important that you understand how to write a good survey, but you shouldn't be spending your time writing tons and tons of surveys, when you can focus on adding more value on the back end.
Yeah, I think this generation that's becoming AI native or first is going to be like that early wave of internet web
Yeah,
adopters. There is a real opportunity to shine right now. The path is not maybe as clear as it would be nice to be. I mean, I think we were talking before, kind of kids similar-ish age, and you're kind of thinking, 13, 15, like what does work look like when they come, and the
yeah,
importance of college is, I think there's a stat came out yesterday that there's more unemployed college grads than non-college grads at this time for the first time ever, and things
yeah,
like that. So yeah, I think it is a huge opportunity, but you kind of have to embrace it, and you have to be very, I guess, self-driven in terms of there's so many great resources out there, and whether it's YouTube videos, podcasts, examples, GitHub libraries, whatever it might be, but just pick some of these tools up and play around
yeah.
and solve challenges.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting that you brought it up, and I see it popping up in a lot of different fields, but especially within ours, is people who are coming out of college or even an MBA.
Yep.
They don't necessarily have the experience to be that strategic leader,
Yep.
and the technical aspect that typically entry level people would do is no longer needed. So for those people, like, I can see where the challenges arise of like, well, what do you do then? Because you can't get the strategic leadership without the experience, and you can't get the experience if you don't get the entry level job. And so, like, for them, I would, again, push of building relationships. I think is going to be really, really important. But then also demonstrating how you can use AI to drive efficiencies and be really AI native, like you said,
Hmm.
Dave, I think will go a long way, because then companies will start to recognize that, hey, not only can this guy have the potential to offer strategic
Yep.
value, but they know how to use AI, which is a point of difference within our company compared to the oldies like me. who are just still trying to figure the thing out and still have their AOL.com account. But no, obviously I've moved on from that. But so like, I think leaning into AI and embracing that is a good way that more entry level people can come in, and while still demonstrating more of that strategic angle.
So finally, to wrap us up, I guess, just want to really just kind of, I guess, synthesize your full perspective, where the insights profession is heading as AI continues to evolve.
Yeah, I think to summarize it is, man, it's here. I think is what I'd say, and it'll continue to advance. Be very careful about testing and learning. Don't embrace AI everywhere, and be very thoughtful, especially on things that are higher risk. And then third, like I said, sit more in the second camp, which is more about strategic thought partner, less on the technical aspects of how we do the work.
Fantastic. So super great discussion. Really kind of, I guess, philosophical to think about kind of where you think this is heading, this kind of this two-tier structure, that transformation from technical execution to strategic partnership. And I think, AI is an enabler, but it isn't a replacement for that deeper human connection. And where we see this move over the next 3 to 5 years is going to be super exciting. If anyone wants to connect with Kyle, he's on LinkedIn. Just drop him a connection. Kyle, thanks again for being a guest on the show. Super interesting to get your perspective and hear what an organization at the scale of McDonald's is doing in the space as well.
Well, thank you so much, Dave. Really appreciate it. And this is the fun stuff. So it was a pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks, Kyle.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to AI Role Models. Follow now wherever you get your podcasts to be notified of new episodes. Connect with One Strategy on LinkedIn to join us for live recordings. Don't forget to leave a review, and we can't wait to see you again soon for our next episode.